Here today. Anybody not been here before? Look at that. We have a lot. That's fantastic. Well, welcome. The Nonprofit Collaborative, we have been going for just about 4 years now. So we started in early 15. So our big news right now is that we are officially a 501c3 nonprofit. So that just happened. Here is our fearless board of directors, several of whom are in the room here today. Bob Reynolds is our moderator for this morning. Jill Kingston with Bridget's Path is here, and Nina Vasilou from Gaslight Consulting is also here. So we were really excited to become a nonprofit. We really just felt like that would take us to the next level to be able to build our capacity and with, frankly, with more firepower, more brain power on the board, to assist me, we can really help develop more resources and programs and services for the nonprofit community. So thrilled, stay tuned. We got a lot of things kind of in the works. We're always interested in hearing from the nonprofit community what you need, so don't hesitate to let us know. Gosh, programming or services or supports in ABC areas would be helpful to us, and we'll see what we can do about it. So let's see, our key collaborative partners. Brady Ware is one of our founding partners. They're our sponsor of today's program and for most of our general programs and events. Again, you'll be talking with Bob here in a little bit. Kara Hamilton is in the back. She's also from Brady Ware. The Better Business Bureau. So up until our becoming a 501c3 nonprofit, the Better Business Bureau has been a huge partner to make the nonprofit collaborative operate. They were serving as our fiscal agent all that time, handling our registration, all that sort of thing. So it's been an amazing collaboration. And then here at the Life Enrichment Center, we hold really pretty much all of our events here at the LEC. We have catering services available to us, very affordable rental space to just make it all possible. Our buzzwords, if you're not familiar, are affordable, accessible, and yet high quality kinds of programs and services. So those partners allow us to achieve those objectives. Some other partners in the community. So if you weren't already on our mailing list, you will be now as a result of attending this morning. So you'll receive our monthly, actually bi-monthly e-news blasts. We share everything that we're doing, everything that our partners are doing and offering, as well as anything else that we hear about in the community that is affordable, accessible, and high-quality nonprofit resources. So here are some of our other partners. SCORE, obviously, the Wright State Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. They just had a workshop here last Friday. Mission Increase Foundation, if you're not familiar with them, they're over in Springfield. It's Christian-based, but amazing trainings and resources to build capacity, particularly financial capacity of your nonprofits. Everything is free that they do, so check them out if you haven't already. Pro Bono Partnership provides free legal services to qualified nonprofits, and of course the library has long been a wonderful partner in the community to offer their foundation center, grant writing support, research, that kind of thing. So you'll hear, of anything they've got going on in our e-blast that we'll send out to you, and anything else that we hear about that we think is of value that you need to know about. Okay. And with that, I want to introduce our panel today. So we chose our panel because each one of these organizations have recently been through a succession plan, but really very different situations in all three. We have Norm and Doug from Habitat for Humanity. Diane served the organization, I don't remember how many years, but quite a long time. And in their success, you're part of a nationwide network. I'm sure this opportunity went out nationwide. And they hired their internal candidate, Norm, who'd been with the organization operations director, I think was your title, for some time. So, hiring an internal candidate, looks different than this external kind of search and, assimilation and such. So we're going to hear from them. Matt Arnst is the board chair of We Care Arts. He's VP with Goodwill Easter Seals. He's going to share about, with We Care Arts, their executive director was retiring after 30 years. She was the founder and executive director for many, many years. So that kind of dynamic, right, of succeeding the executive director is different too. So we're going to hear from them. And then Lori Arion is the founder and CEO of Families of Addicts, and her situation was a little bit different as well. So she is still at the helm of the organization, certainly needed operational kind of support, but also, of course, thinking about succession plan. So we're going to hear from all three of them, lessons learned. We're going to definitely have time. Bob's going to moderate for us. So Bob is our partner with Brady Ware, and he's going to moderate for us and ask the panelists some questions, but we're going to have lots of times for Q&A as well. So feel free to ask questions too. So with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to come up. We've got a couple of live mics here and just one that needs to be, these two need to be turned on. Actually, I can help you with that. While we get settled, I'm going to pass the baton over here to Bob. There you go.
Kodak moment.
Taking a selfie. Come on. Good morning. Yeah, everybody doing okay? It's Friday. As Jenny said, it didn't snow. You're going to get to hear from some great folks, and more importantly, not hear from them, but learn from them. So we'll let them get situated. And then before we start, I just wanted to share a couple of comments. One, we're equally as excited to be involved with the collaborative. We're very excited about being able to work with our other collaborative partners and really bring attention and focus to the work that's being done here, and to sort of have that ability to say, we're an organization built on collaboration, and through collaboration we created a 501c3 with the sole mission of serving other or nonprofit organizations and encouraging you to find partners in the community to collaborate with. One of my favorite sayings is by Gandhi, and it's always, you must be the change that you expect to see in the world. That means a lot to me personally, and I know it means an awful lot to the folks that have been involved in helping with this transition with the collaborative. And really all of you are doing that every day in your lives, either as a member of the leadership team of your organization or a volunteer. So my first question really is for the audience. How many of you are here are the leader of your organization or a member of the leadership team? Okay. The rest of you, are you board members or volunteers? Board member? I'm a board member too. You saw my picture here a few minutes ago. How many of you are here just because we had free breakfast and you had nowhere else to go? All right, some hands in the back. All right, we're going to ask the group up here to share their stories first, and then we're going to ask a few questions along the way. But most importantly today, we want you to have the opportunity to theoretically interview them on how did you do it, why did you do it, what should we do first. But I want to leave you with one thought. Write these two letters down if you're taking notes. SP. I always refer to it as the two SPs, the two fundamental things every organization should have, and unfortunately so many don't. Number one, a strategic plan. If you're really wanting to further your mission and continue to impact lives, you need to know where you're going, and a strategic plan is your roadmap. It helps you to sort of get all the cats that you're trying to herd in the same direction. So everybody needs a strategic plan. The other SP is what we're going to talk about today, a succession plan. So while that strategic plan helps you set the pathway towards the future, the succession plan helps you to be able to sustain and keep that momentum moving. Without those two key components, my experience in 30-some years as an advisor to nonprofits, you'll struggle. You'll really struggle to achieve your mission. if you don't have a strategic plan. And then most importantly, with a succession plan, when that leader or the driver or the person leading the charge steps down or steps aside, the organization takes 10 steps backwards and starts all over again. That creates fatigue in your staff, creates fatigue for your board members, and most importantly, it takes the focus away from doing good for the folks that you serve to now we have to focus internally and deal with this transition and all this chaos again. I think in my career, I was telling our representatives here from Habitat, I think there are 3 types of succession. A planned succession, which they're going to talk to you about, an unplanned succession, and then an unexpected succession. Now, you might wonder what's the difference between unplanned and unexpected. Unplanned would be where the executive director is, or it could be a key volunteer, on the board. I'm tired and I come in, today's what, the 8th? If I don't know, I'm an accountant and it's tax season, so I don't know what day it is. But anyway, they come in on Friday and say, you know what, I've been thinking about it for a while. 9 times out of 10 they haven't communicated this, but I'm tired. And I think I'm going to retire at the end of the month. That's unplanned. And the other sad situation is you're the chair of the board, or a key member of the leadership of the volunteer board, and you get a phone call from, an administrative person or a program person inside the organization to say, Bob, I don't know how to tell you this, but the director last night was in a traffic accident and they've passed away. That's unexpected. So I draw the distinction between both because, quite frankly, the rate, while the plan may be the same, the conditions are going to be much different. Because even with that unplanned transition, we at least have till the end of the month, right? So we at least have 2 weeks to come up with something. The unexpected, that's now. We have no opportunity. And in my 30 years, I've seen all 3. So with that, I'm going to turn the comments over to Norm and Doug. Since they're the closest to me, we'll just go right down the line here. And what I'd like you to do, gentlemen, is talk about the transition in leadership, for the organization. But for the participants, talk about not why necessarily why you may have picked Norm, but more the process. What was the decision-making process that led you to make the offer to Norm, and how did we administer that? Because I think that's what all of you kind of want to know.
You don't know anything about the process.
So we were fortunate that Diane Graham, who was our executive director, had been there, how long had she, 10, 15 years?
Well, 9 years as executive director,
right.
But she's been involved for probably 25 years.
So she gave us a heads up, kind of a courtesy. I want to retire when I won't tell you what the age was. That would be rude. And so we knew way in advance. And so what we did was we formed a board committee, and it was an adjunct committee just for the process of replacing Diane. And there was a lot of discussion about who would be on this committee, when would we form this committee. Diane had said she wanted to retire on 12/31, so and she gave us, I think she gave us a 1.5 years notice, maybe 2. So we waited until about March of 17, and because she wanted to retire 12/31/17, formed the committee, and we included board members as well as a couple people from outside the board, outside of our organization, just to have a broader thought process. And we cast a wide net with search through the Habitat community. The Dayton affiliate is an attractive affiliate, and so we thought maybe some of the smaller affiliate executive directors would be interested. There's some websites in Dayton amongst the nonprofit world. I'm sorry, I don't know them. The people who we needed to know about them knew about them. So we cast the web there, and then we also approached individuals who we knew, and so we really had a nice net there. We had a process where we kind of whittled it down through some preliminary interviews. We had personality testing done through the HR Challey test. Thankfully for us, one of our board members was with Miller Valentine in the human resources area, so she gave us a lot of guidance and had access to that test. And from there, we whittled it down to 3 folks, and at the end, it was Norm. And it was a great decision. And Norm started in October, around October, so there was a little bit of overlap with Diane. But since he was internal, we didn't maybe need as much overlap as we would have if it would have been somebody who wasn't familiar with the organization. And he's hit the ground running, and I think it's been pretty seamless. I mean, from the perspective of the board, we haven't had to say, oh my gosh, we've gone backwards. I mean, you talked, Bob, about taking 10 steps backward. I think immediately day one, we took a step forward. And that's been great for our organization. And 18 months later, we've never been stronger than we are today. And that's a credit to Diane. It's a credit to the board, that committee, and credit to Norm certainly as well. So that's kind of the 30,000 square or foot level question. You can ask a question, but if the lady next to you does, she's not going to be addressed because she works with me. And the last thing you want is a colleague asking you questions from the back of the room. And don't whisper questions in his ear, Nan. I don't want to hear that. I'll see that as well. So.
You said something about a personality test for the candidate. He's here. But so I don't know if you can really.
I'd like to hear it, yeah.
It went well.
How much of a factor were the results of the personality test on selecting?
They really were. They really were. The test, and I think I have your test, but I wouldn't give it to you. There were a number of different sections on there, and one of the sections, I mean, the obvious ones, you know, their experience and the way they handle people and some of those things. And, you know, a lot of you probably have taken the same test. You know, they ask you the same question and 4 points during the test to see if you're honest and can give the same answer and all that kind of stuff. There was a part in the test and in our interviews where we really got a sense of, did the individual understand our mission and believe in it? And there were some folks who were tremendously competent executives, and they had run businesses. They had been on boards of nonprofits, well-known nonprofits. But when they came into the interview, they asked a lot of questions showing they probably hadn't even clicked on our website. And everybody knows who Habitat is, so I mean we kind of get it. But at the same time, we just expected a little bit more in that perspective. And so that began to rule some people out. Then you get a sense of their belief in the mission and what we're about. And that actually came through on that personality test to some extent. It didn't obviously address their specifics around the Habitat mission, but you could tell whether they had a belief in the mission and whether their personality was, were they collaborative or were they dictatorial and all that kind of thing to make sure we got the right person in charge. And we obviously chose well. And I would say that even if you weren't here.
Which test did you use?
It was the Challey. I think it's spelled Chally. I don't think it's cheap, but we might not even have paid for it. I think Miller Valentine might have paid for it for us because, again, we happened to have a board member who had access to it, and so we were kind of very lucky in that fashion. But it was definitely worth it.
Now that you've gone through the process, is the succession plan written down now, and who owns that? And do you have now a person who you're working to succeed more?
Norm can't retire for 50 years. Or as I told him, I'm off the board in 22 months, so I really don't care after that. I do. I did some research in advance of this event, and if you go on a search engine and you type in nonprofit executive director turnover, you get a lot of great information. And there are a lot of studies out there. I read a study from Syracuse University, a study from NC State, North Carolina State, and a study from some, I don't know, organization. I can't remember what the name of it is. I wrote it down. It's over there. And they threw a lot of statistics at me that were maybe a little bit common sense, but it just reinforced what I believed. So when this happens, 44% of organizations have a plan and 56 don't. There's no plan. So then they have to scramble. And there were lots of pretty interesting information around how the success goes. So I think the belief is that everybody does what Diane did. You just work until retirement. But in fact, the Syracuse study, the NC State study showed that it's around 20% or a little over 20% of executive directors actually go until retirement, which means, to your point, Bob, you better have a plan. Because that means about 80% of them are not going to go until retirement, and you get the unplanned, unexpected situation. So you need to have a plan, and it needs to be part of your strategic plan or part of your process. And we did memorialize what we did. Doesn't mean it's right, but we did memorialize what we did.
That was a great question, and one of mine that I don't have to ask now. But we will ask it of the rest of the group. Let's move over now to Matt. And why don't you give us a little bit of your story?
Yes, our situation was a little bit different. Our founder of the organization, who'd been there for over 30 years, wanted to retire and then didn't really want to retire, but it was time. And so that was really hard for her, and she was probably the first conversation was helping her make that decision. It's a hard decision. You do that every day for that long, and now you're not going to do it anymore. So she had to get to that place and did. So lots of conversations about how is this process going to look, what's your involvement in the process, what's the board's involvement in the process, who's going to own the different parts of the process, and just lots of conversations to get everybody comfortable with how that was going to go. And at the end of the day, everything's going to be okay. The other thing we had to do is sort of straighten up administratively in-house. A small nonprofit, there's an awful lot of stuff in everybody's heads. It's not always written down as nicely as you would like. And so fortunately, we were getting some certifications that we and eventually got CARF certification, and that forced the issue a little bit. We had to write down a lot more than we had at the time, but had to do a lot of that because you got to get that stuff down on paper and make sure it's well understood to pass it on to somebody. So that was tough. Staff, a small nonprofit, you've got staff that have been there a long time. They're not there for the money. They're there because they love the mission of the organization, and here's their leader for 34 years, retiring away. So lots of conversations again about the process and who's going to do what, and reassurance it's all going to be okay. And then, really conversations with the incoming person as well about how's this process going to work? How do you want it to work? What's the overlap? Thankfully, we were blessed with being able to have some overlap. So I know we didn't get everything down on paper. There was still an awful lot of stuff in people's heads that had to get out. And for an organization that is built on a lot of relationships and fundraising, a lot of information had to get passed. So we were fortunate to be able to have that overlap and do that. But sitting here today, we're probably there's more in writing and more formalized than we had at the time. So that was kind of our process. We were fortunate as well. We had a former board member who had been a HR executive, and she wrote out the plan and how we were going to execute it and the timeline, and kind of kept us on track to make sure we were moving forward in getting the process done. I think we originally talked to maybe 6 or 7, whittled it down to 3, including an internal candidate, and eventually then brought in Darlene, who was not the internal candidate. We brought Darlene in from another agency.
All right. Well, thank you. Wave again. And we may come back and ask you and Norm a couple of questions, having been to get your perspective on being one that interviewed and applied for the position. Any quick questions for Matt?
Yeah.
Can I ask a global question to the panel?
Sure.
What are some of your, how do you overcome, or what are some of your strategies for, we've always done it that way, to overcome that? What are some of your strategies to overcome that?
That's an easy question, right?
A lot of it's just communication. It's just talking through it, and you know, that, to be honest, that's one of the exciting aspects of changing leadership, is to get out of that a little bit. I mean, when the same person's there for 34 years, you've got that same perspective for 34 years. So for a small organization, it is an opportunity to have someone come in and look at things a little bit differently. Scary for the staff, but an opportunity still the same.
That's my question really too. How, it seems to me your next leader would need to have a skill set that's not quite the same as what you had from the founder. Was that part of your consideration as you went in? How did you identify the kind of skills you were looking for, and how that all happened?
It very much was. You know, a small nonprofit that starts in the basement of a church grows sort of organically, and it's still very nonprofit-y. It's probably not a word, but so one advantage to making that change is it's a business, and this is our opportunity to bring someone in who looks at it a bit more like a business and grows it that way. And I mean, fortunately for us, I think the organization was ready for that change. It was time for that change, so it all worked out timing-wise. But a great point. That's your opportunity to sort of get it back on a business framework, I think.
I referred to the surveys that I read, and I think it's one of the surveys talked about 34% of the nonprofits do not do what your question was around, and properly laying out the organizational skills that is needed or are needed from the new person, because organizations change. I mean, even if it's just 2 or 3 years as opposed to 30 or 10, that ED needs a different skill set, and do you properly assess, you know, what it is, and 1/3 of them don't.
Norm, you were gonna, and then we'll go to the next question.
If I can speak to your question about the, we've always done it that way. I think from my position, obviously, you'd be surprised how the, number one, like your staff, although they may be thinking that way initially, once the current leader is no longer there, I think you'd find that most of the staff has either ideas that they weren't confident enough to bring to the table, and I think as a new director or something like that, a lot of times it's things that you see, you recognize, and it's just giving some of the ability to make those steps. Even board. Now, like I said, I have a different experience with my board of directors, but I think initially the board of directors obviously has made the choice, right, with the new leadership. And so I think the opportunity there is, you have to take the initiative to not do it the same way. Great things are great things, you do them the same way. But I think, as you see things, that's when you make the change. Yeah.
One more question, and then we're going to move to Lori.
This question's for Matt. Norm had talked about a personality test. Did you implement something similar, or how did you come up with your questions to distinguish between the two?
Yeah, we didn't do a personality test. We just came up with a set of questions.
All right, we're going to move to Lori now and ask her to share her story.
So I think we still might be kind of nonprofit-y. So my question to you was, first, so I know who I'm speaking to, is how many of you were that person that had the vision, had the idea, had a solution to a problem, and started working on that problem, ultimately created a nonprofit, and here you are today trying to figure it out. So in other words, we're 5 years old, so you're 5 years old or younger. Anybody in the room that's that young? Don't be shy, because I'm sitting up here, right? So So that's our case. So we just turned 5 last November, and so I was hoping to learn from all of you. And when Jenny asked me to do this, I was thinking, what? Like, why would you ask me? Because, you know, we're still figuring it out. And so I decided to do it in an effort to help those of you that are sitting here saying, wow, like, how are we ever going to get to what the things that you're talking about? A human resource test, we can't even afford a full audit. So I'm sitting here, I'm overwhelmed, I'm thinking, how am I ever going to get through this? What was I thinking? Because a lot of people start a nonprofit semi on a whim, not knowing what they're doing. I'm a graphic artist by trade. And so when I decided to start FOA, it was on a whim. I took off running. And I feel like to build the organization, I went to a lot of trainings. I did a lot of learning. I took all of the SCORE series. The problem was I didn't have anyone to give all of that information to start actually working on those things. So I had a lot of knowledge, but nowhere to put it. Selecting the board, initially, you have to have a board. When you get a bank account for a nonprofit, you have to get a board. So that's why I created a board, because I had to. And when you're working in the field of addiction, it's very stigmatizing. So from the beginning, what I was doing, I felt was really challenging, because not everybody wants to be associated with addiction. They don't want to put themselves out there. So our first board was family members that had been coming to my weekly meetings and showed interest and had some type of skill. And I will say the first board that I had, me and the president butt heads a lot. It was like every time someone had an idea, she seemed to slap our hands, and I just thought it was really unmotivating. And then I talked to Monty from the Victory Project. Anybody know him? And he was like, oh yeah, that's so typical, that's normal. It was like that for me, and I was like, oh, so this is normal. So I feel good that this is the way it is. And so since those days, operating with that board, and for us, in order to get funding, a recovery community organization has to have a majority of people in recovery on it, right? People in new recovery don't have the skill set or the time or what is really the business sense to run the board. So since that time, they've since allowed family members to be part of that equation. So when I initially applied to be a recovery community organization, they said we were too family oriented to become one. So I haven't revisited that, but just know that was difficult too. So selecting people who wanted to be a part of my organization was difficult. So got a board of directors, and I called myself the executive director because I felt that president, CEO was like really did not fit me at all. I was really just trying to make some kind of a change. And for the last 5 years, that's what I've been doing. And a lot of people had told me that you have to go slow to go fast. And I was going really fast. And I will say the need was urgent. You know, when I started 5 years ago, people weren't really talking about addiction, and within the first couple of years, we started having the massive amounts of overdoses. So when you're trying to help families be better and you're trying to save lives, I felt I didn't have a choice to go slower. It wasn't like at 5 o'clock I turned my phone off because my day is done. So I felt like I had no choice but to go running. And to do it all over again, I don't necessarily know if I would do it any different, because it got us where we are today to be able to make a huge impact. However, the time has come to slow down, because I'm going to be 60 next year, and I've been running really fast for 5 years. So when I realized, well, Jeff Sorrell actually has a pivotal piece in this, that we were talking one day about the struggles of a small nonprofit. And he said, well, I'm the visionary. I come up with the ideas, and then I have Jenny who puts them all, she implements all of them. I'm like, that's what I need. And I said, I have the ideas, but I don't have anybody to be in the weeds with them, create the process. I'm not a process person. I'm a graphic designer. You know, I don't get things on paper. I make what other people write look good. I don't do the writing. I don't do the messaging. But I was forced to do all of this because, and I'm still basically forced to do that. But so he said, I'm the visionary. And I thought, and that was the first time that I thought it was okay to not be good at everything. That I wasn't, the expectation of myself to be able to do everything, it was okay to know that you're not good at everything. So part of that was deciding what I wasn't good at and what skills I needed in people, and look for those skills for new people on the board and for volunteers that we were recruiting, and really just knowing my limitations, right? So last year I started working, we decided to create an advisory board, and I would say that was probably a little premature, but Doug Barry was the one who, as I told him from Barry staff, I said, I heard that you have to have all of your I's dotted and T's crossed in order to start an advisory board, and that's what we're wanting to do, but we don't have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And he said, let's do it. I'm like, okay, will you lead this? And he said yes. So that started that process. Most of you may know we do a big rally every year, and it's very time consuming. And so in the midst of that, we were, I had said we need to hire an executive director. You know, this has to happen. So my need arose out of running really fast and knowing that I could not run fast anymore. At the end of 2017, I said I have one more year left to run this fast, and then I can't. And that was December. Last December. So that was how I started planning. So this is really rudimentary, you guys. So I'm hoping that I'm impacting the new person who's overwhelmed and feeling somewhat, you know, hopeless out there. And Barry's staff had wanted me to be in the weeds with all of that. And I'm like, look, can't you just, like, you know, screen candidates for me? And then after the rally, we'll go through them and we'll call them in. And they're like, yes, well, you know, we can do that. So one of the things I learned too, to touch on that, is some people have accused me of being a control freak. You don't want to let go. You don't want to delegate. And that wasn't really it. I had heard in, I think, a leadership training I was in, that you may delegate and you may fail at some things. You give a volunteer something to do and it doesn't get accomplished. And so it doesn't get accomplished. So what I've done is things that are, there is no room for failure, I'm going to be really careful about. And other things I've been able to learn to let go on. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. If we didn't make that event because the volunteers didn't get it on their calendar, or my volunteer coordinator didn't follow up with people, it didn't happen. Doesn't make us look good, but it's not a deal breaker. You know what I mean? So I never really was not wanting to delegate. It's just that I didn't really have a whole lot of skilled people. We're dealing mostly with volunteers to delegate to. So with the process with Barry's staff, and that's when I was like, can you do this? Right? So ask people to do stuff. Don't be afraid to ask. And they did that. And that's where we settled in on Anita, who's sitting up here in the front. We did not have a test. I suggested that they make a phone call to her and see if she could speak well, and send her an email and ask her to answer a question. And I feel like those two things tell a lot about a person. If you can't speak and you can't put a sentence together, I'm not sure you can be our executive director. Someone on our board said the executive director needs to be someone who is experiencing addiction and recovery so they understand. And I disagreed with that. I wanted someone who had resilience, because when you're dealing with a situation like this, we don't want an unexpected departure. My child overdosed and died, and I can't handle this. my child relapsed, and I am in it. And I'm telling you, my daughter's been in a relapse the last year. It has been a very, very hard year. So you have to be resilient. And I felt like if someone was in it like we are, that took the resilience factor out. So I feel that was a good call. Anita comes from the developmental disability field, so she understood stigma and she understood compassion for challenged individuals. And I quickly saw that when she attended our initial weekly meetings that we have here every week. And so those qualities are ones that I needed. Someone who could be compassionate, be passionate about what we're doing. And another candidate was a lady who lived out of town, and she had a whole lot of business sense, but I had the feeling she would be like a strategic planner I worked with that would have monopolized all of my time getting it to the business stage. And that's good, but like I did not have the mental capacity to be there yet. And she was far away. So how would she be able to learn our culture and know what our product was if she wasn't here? So,
Lori,
huh?
I was going to say, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, just so what I'm hearing, I guess, just to make sure, really right now your organization is in the stage where it's pretty much all volunteer driven. You don't really have a paid staff,
right.
Do you? A paid director?
Well, Anita and I are contracted.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we're still really small.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing all that information. So as you can see, before you open up for additional questions, because I want to make sure we allow this group an opportunity to sort of, since we have you all captive here, that we can pick your brains. I just the observation I guess that I have here is you can see these are vastly three different things, and I saw heads nodding in the room. So I think each one of these stories resonates with you. Obviously, larger organizations that are more established, one would expect that we have a lot of processes in this whole plan, if you will, defined. The comment I would make to that is I've dealt with very large, very organized organizations with, the process at the end of the year, many W-2s, and you would be surprised. There are a lot of those, and you shared some statistics that don't really have a plan. You assume that they would. Each one of these is different. That promotion from within, the observation I would share, and I think we heard it here, in the Habitat example. Part of the process, I guess, of that, if you've had that director in place for a while, and the benefit that you have of an internal hire, they already have what? Knowledge of the organization. That's a plus. It could also be a negative, to be very respectful. A lot of times when you have folks in the programming area, they may have a lot that are program focused. They may have a lot of understanding of the work that you do on a daily basis. A consideration I would offer, or an observation, sometimes most organizations with their program folks, when it comes to training and development, they focus their energy around the program-related work that they do. Organizations tend to cut back and don't spend money on leadership development for internal managers. And I've seen the same in our firm. You have an experienced auditor and they're a manager, and you make them a partner, and they're ineffective. So don't overlook the aspect if you're wanting to have that, and I'll come right back to you, wanting to have that kind of internal succession. And my firm is based on that. I mean, we're growing the partners of the future. We don't want to have to go out and hire them from other firms. So don't overlook the cost and the opportunity and the need to developing leadership skills. Because, again, you can be a very effective manager and you can fail once you take the throne, so to speak, at the top. You had an option.
I just wanted to mention, Bob, I think you'll appreciate this. Plan for finances. So I know Habitat said they also had an overlap. We had an overlap, and we were very blessed to be able to do that. But you have to plan for that financially. So if you're looking a year ahead and your budget has to include, you know, even 2 months or 6 months of an additional executive director, not only from the budgeting or front end, but from the other side. So the following year, after your audit and after you're writing grants, you're having to explain an increase in your administrative expenses. And a lot of times it's significant because you're paying the head person of your organization more money. So I just wanted to mention that because I know 2 of us mentioned overlap, and then again with Lori's situation where not everyone is technically staffed. Those are things you have to think about when you're doing that. One of those very simple but easily overlooked.
And then we're going to open it up for questions, but really, huh?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Your comments made me sort of rose a question that I'd ask Norm. I guess I could ask him any day I want, but we're here. So when you get promoted from within, it's a different dynamic than coming in from the outside. So did you have any challenges with the staff who maybe used to see you as a colleague and now see you as the boss?
So I think as expected, there are, and I have to say that I had a great relationship with most of the staff that we have. But I also want to say that some of the staff that we had, and this is again in my opinion, were not the right staff members to take us where we needed to go. And so I think with any transition, I'm sure you've had the same, Darlene, is that, you know, when you get there, right, you have to evaluate who's on the team and are they right. I did a lot of, Doug will share this too, some of my staff members, I've realigned their positions because there are strengths that they had, and this sometimes is due to the fact that our prior executive director had different skills than I, right? And so, you know, she may have been great at, you know, ABC, you know, and I was great at B, C, D, you know, so there are things that, you know, as I identify them, some of my other staff members, right, fill those gaps and actually do it really well. But we did, like I said, I did obviously, there were staff members who are no longer with us. There was some of that. Some of it was, I think they just didn't know what the future really was going to be like with me rather than our prior ED. And so they obviously made different choices. I think that's to be expected.
Do both of you feel empowered by your board to do what you need to do? And one of the surveys addressed that the boards really didn't give good leadership or good guidance to the new executive directors. So then there was another quick turnover, and they were right back at it again. So the proper answer is yes, I gave you the guidance to do what you want to do.
And
you know, and a huge, I think to me that was a huge advantage because I had been there for so long. I really knew the board of directors, and I feel fortunate that I have my board that I do because I don't have some of the issues that you have, but some of that is the difference between a governing board, right, or more of an operating board. And so, you know, fortunately, my board is a governing board, and we have a great relationship. Yeah.
And Matt, your leadership are compensated director when you're not volunteer led. Well, first off, thank you guys for sharing your stories. And Lori, all I can tell you, hang in there. I mean, eventually it will get better. My observation for you, and it's, you know, you have that passion, and everybody's main concern is trying to service your targeted constituency. I mentioned earlier the need for every organization to have a strategic plan, and I guess one comment I would make for you to consider with your volunteer group, and I know it takes you away from the things that I think you're probably more passionate about, but volunteer board-led organizations where folks are not compensated, the more structure you can bring around volunteer expectations, job descriptions, particularly if they are filling positions and doing things that otherwise people would be compensated for. You kind of have to stop, even though you don't want to stop running. You got to kind of put that in place, because I think then that becomes a catalyst in a process to recruit board members that are better, to manage your volunteers better, and things of that nature. And I would encourage you to talk to Jenny, continue talking to Jenny, because I know there are folks involved with the collaborative that focus on volunteer recruitment and management. I think that would be a help. And at this point, we have about a half hour or 20 minutes left. So we're going to turn it over to all of you to either ask questions, or we're going to sit up here and we'll ask you guys questions. But we're going to keep you here for 20 minutes. So the first hand that went up was back here, the lady who stole my earlier question.
I'm probably going to continue on that question. Now, my question is for Norm.
Yes.
Now, understanding you're new in the position, but at this point, are you looking at someone who will be the person that you're going to groom to replace you?
Honest answer? So one of the wonderful things about being asked to do this is, of course, I thought, you know what, we need to formalize that. I've always been a big believer of, any position I've been in, you have to train others to do what you do. It's not a threat. I'm not worried about somebody taking my job, kind of thing. Never have. But one of the things I was fortunate to have is that in our prior executive director, I worked with her for 9 years, and so over the years there were many things that she shared with me as I was director of operations, and so the operational part of it, I don't want to say I already knew it all, because you definitely don't, but I had a great base. But with that said, one of the things that we did have prior to my becoming executive director, matter of fact, about 3 years in, we had basically just a contingent plan where if something did happen, one of those oh no events, we actually had a document that said at that time that I would step in as the interim executive director. And at that time, of course, I was just thinking, okay, great, I'll do whatever, and I had no desires at that point to be the executive director. Let's just say that. But as the time went by, that became obviously a reality. But moving forward, like I say, there are staff members I'm already training to do many of the things that I do. Number one, temporarily if I'm out, and permanently so that somebody else knows how to do those things as we hopefully move forward and grow.
And we didn't lose the resumes that weren't chosen.
Is that a threat?
No pressure.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm representing a small nonprofit, and we're looking at succession planning. But one of the things that we've been talking about is, should the agency merge with another organization versus, the struggle to keep doing the fundraising. In your process of looking at a new executive director, did any of the agencies look at that possibility of merging? If so, what did you do?
We did not. Actually, prior to you becoming executive director, we had one of our other affiliates merge in with us because they sort of faced that same problem. So Habitat of Greene County, they were just kind of maintaining what they had but not growing, and they approached us, and so we merged. They came into the fold with us, but we did not.
So obviously that is a great option to consider, in my opinion, depending on, and to shed a little more light on Doug's comment. So we as the Dayton affiliate, we're staffed, we had processes, and again, Diane did a great job of establishing all the things that you're trying to do, right? So that was in place, whereas the Greene County was strictly volunteer. And so was it a formal succession plan for them? I don't know. I think it was more just they knew they wanted to do more they knew that as a volunteer organization that wasn't going to happen quickly. So for them, that was a great, and I'll share that too, was a great opportunity for us. So,
Matt, how about you? You guys ever considered that?
Yeah, so we had explored the option years before we got to the point of Terry wanting to retire, and for lots of good reasons decided that it wasn't the time. It really wasn't what we wanted to do. So when it came time to do the search for Terry leaving, we did not explore that again, not seriously.
Have you had time to even think about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For us, I had a brief conversations with an organization called WestCare that would have taken on a lot of the admin responsibilities for us, but they were also going to change our name and do all kinds of other things. And basically, we had to do the work ourselves. So I wasn't willing to give all that up. Since then, we're working with Facing Addiction and other national organizations to think about expansion. It does force you to get everything you need down on paper. So I feel like, when you're the founder, you're very passionate about everything. And I think this is where they say you need to work on your organization, not in it. And so that's the point where I'm at. And it is a different hat. But yes, we definitely would consider partnering or collaborating with other organizations. And also you get the funding opportunities can open up when they see that you're collaborating and not just siloed doing what you're doing. So we're definitely talking about it and considering something like that.
That is an excellent question. For all of the organizations in the room, one thing that I think as a board member and some of the boards that I serve on, and it's kind of changed over time, I think we are finally getting to the point where we stop talking badly or disingenuously about other organizations. We all know that there are limited funds, so the people who are getting the grants, they're happy. The people who aren't getting the grants, they blame the people who are, We're all out competing for the same dollars. I appreciate what Habitat shared here. I've served on a board and currently serve on a board where you have a national organization. The Heart Association, United Way, Habitat for Humanity. That infrastructure brings a whole lot more resources to the table. When it comes to succession, you have the ability to post the job on their internal network. I am involved with our local United Way, and Richmond, Indiana is where I live. It's a small community. In my 6-year term on the board, we've had an executive director relocate to Clearwater, Florida, to go to work to be an executive director for what? A bigger and better United Way. Plus, they don't have snow and crappy weather like we do. And so we promoted from within. So actually, this is kind of funny. We promoted from within, and then last summer, director, she took a job again in another zip code and probably another nicer weather area of the country. So we have been through this succession twice, and ironically what we've done is our current director is a former board member who came back to run the organization. So hearing them talk about this, it's like, geez, I've lived this the last 6 years. Other questions?
Doug, you mentioned, I think, that you put together an adjunct committee to select the executive director. Can you tell us a little bit about what that committee, the people consisted of, how often you met, type of things you did to start the search?
My recollection, because it's 2 years ago now,
okay,
was that it was a committee of about 6 or 7 people. There were 2 external that were not on our board and not, I don't even know if they were donors or anything. I think there was people we knew that we respected in the community that were maybe business owners, so they were used to hiring. And we made sure that when we formed this committee, it had a diversity of thought. And on purpose, the board, I was the vice chair at the time. The board chair and I were not on that committee. We wanted to have 6 or 7 broader opinions. We, of course, were brought in to consult and talk, and we were part of the decision-making process. But I did not interview any of the candidates other than, well, I knew one of them already, so I didn't really have to interview him, and I interviewed Norm, just because they said that they wanted to go with Norm, but before they wanted to go with Norm, they wanted the board chair and the vice chair to interview him. And so that was when I talked to you. It was a good process. Again, you want diversity of thought, diversity of perspective, and they met, geez, probably every month, maybe, and then emails more frequently. But we had an HR director, we had an attorney, we had a professor. I'm trying to think of who else was on that.
Consultant.
Who was the consultant? Oh yeah, we had a consultant who was on the board, a leadership consultant, and then the two outside folks, and they did a lot of work. They did an awful lot of work.
Yes, right back here in the green shirt. That's you.
Okay.
Unless I'm colorblind, that kind of looks like green to me from up here.
Okay, so more kind of in the nitty-gritty. Did any of you consider hiring a search firm, an executive search firm? If you didn't, why? And then how did you go about structuring the questions? I know that many of you had HR professionals, so I'm going to assume you did situational interviewing and that you had multiple people involved in the process. Can you tell us more about that? As far as the interviews, did you grill this person? Did you bring them in for an 8-hour day or a weekend, and did you have to meet 20 people and talk, or how did you handle that kind of stuff?
The surveys that I've referred to said that only 12% of nonprofits hire an outside executive firm. 68% follow the path that Habitat did. So that gets to 80. I don't know what the other 20 did. We had, was it exhaustive and penalizing and difficult when we interviewed you? I don't know.
It was a couple hours. It was a nice, it was and I was interviewed by, excuse me, by the entire committee. And, they asked me questions, not just, of course, about the mission, but about myself, and I guess got deeper into, my skill sets and things like that. But, at the end of the day, I guess to me, I just speak my mind. I'm honest about what I want to do, and obviously that's, they made the choice.
We had interviews lined up so that we had 3 or 4 candidates come in, and that made it easier on the 6 or 7 committee members who participated.
Lori, I'm interested because I view that you're in the throes of this, if you will. You're wanting to redefine your role. Maybe you have plans at some point to stop running. How did you go about identifying that volunteer that would come in? Although you did say you guys are contract employees, but what was the process of identifying who you were going to bring in to take on that greater operational role? And then eventually, I'm assuming the plan would be to transition into sort of kind of what you're doing, being out there, being that champion and that leader. Did you have a committee, or was that just you making the pick?
Basically, it was myself and Barry staff. What Barry staff did is, and I really let them take the lead and then kind of approved what they did, but they came up with a series of, I think, 8 questions. So like a survey that each candidate had to answer. Some of them were, based on their skills. I'm not sure I even remember what those were. Barry staff came up with those questions that helped them identify, and also by working with me as to, we identified our needs. Well, what do we need? So even though we needed an executive director, we also need an operations manager. We need all kinds of things. So executive director is wearing a lot of hats currently. And so that's how we identified who was going to come in. And we also interviewed several people on the same day to make it easier.
And so because I think that comes back to your question. So you did essentially rely on a third-party provider.
I did. So it was Barry staff. And good thing was we didn't need to pay them to do that. And I will say that since those early days, we now do have a board succession plan, so that we always keep our intellect and have a schedule for all of that. We have we just elected several new board members with that rotating schedule. We do have a strategic plan that was done by Wright State students, and the plan focuses a lot on board development and organizational development as opposed to programs, because that's what we need. And even though that's not what we wanted to hear, we need that. And so we were able to get that accomplished through Wright State. And then currently, I'm asking for what I need. And so I'm working with a guy in Cleveland who's doing this totally free, 1 hour a week to develop, starting with a plan of action. After talking with him yesterday, he's broken it down, and we kind of need to take these baby steps. And so even though we need a strategic plan, that's coming, but a plan of action is coming first. And he's doing it free for me, and he said, my skin in the game is you're a great organization, you're going to help a lot of people, and I can help you do that. So just get the people in place that you need.
Did Barry staff then post the position and
yes,
interview the
they
candidates?
Posted it on Indeed.
Okay.
On Indeed, and then they pre-screened them, and then I think we had a handful of 10 people. And I'm going to tell you, initially, Anita's resume was very sparse of information. This other gal that was, very credentialed up was way overkill. And ultimately for us too, it was part of fitting into the culture, but yet bringing new skills to the table. I do think fitting in with the culture, understanding the mission is huge.
And Matt, what about you? Did you guys use a firm, or it was all done similar to Habitat?
Yeah, we talked about it briefly and felt like, for a small nonprofit, the expense is large, and so we felt like we could make it through the process without that expense. And again, had a board member, ex-board member with a lot of expertise on how to go through this process. So we were lucky. We had that resource and had confidence that she knew the steps we needed to take to be successful.
Perfect. I want to call on some people who haven't had a chance to ask in the gray sweater.
We're a middle-sized nonprofit, and I'm the founder since 1978, so it's difficult to pick someone, but we relied more on, we didn't use an outside staff. We picked someone from within our organization after looking for a couple of years, and she just sort of God led it to us, seriously. Worked for a lot of years with us on one of our projects, and she just seemed, she's completely different than me. She's organized, which helps. But it just seemed natural, and what we've done as a staff, together, is we're co-directors now. And so she is taking over a little bit more, especially the stuff I don't like, and getting more and more involved. We have 10 different programs in our projects and programs in our thing, so we sort of split them, and now as we go on, she takes over just a little bit more stuff, and it just seems to work for us. One of the things I will say is one of the things we did about a year ago was we did personality tests on everybody in our thing, and it's a different kind of a personality test. One of our people works in that area, and we found who were the people that were the movers and the shakers, and who were the people that were the team members, and all, and it just seemed to help to be able to place everybody in the places that they. So when she does take it over completely, we have the people in mind. So I think it works well. But we couldn't afford to do an outside staff.
I think it's 20 to 30% of the base pay.
I can attest to that because we use them to hire accountants. So
it's not cheap.
As a business owner, and we are not a nonprofit just getting underway. We think it's expensive too. So yeah, the fees can be sort of salty.
We were told by one of our major funders that we should do that. Go to an outside staff. Get somebody from the outside. Don't hire from the inside. But we're more mission driven, and we needed somebody that had the passion that we have. Because she sees the thing, and the days that we may or may not be able to get paid, we know that she'll be there anyway.
Other questions? This side of the room has been kind of quiet. So here's your chance. Anyone else have a question? Okay, I'll come back to you.
Okay, I have a question for Norm. The treasurer of the nonprofit to which I'm a member died of cancer last month, and one of his desires is that we contribute to Habitat for Humanity. So my question to you is, where is the greatest financial need in Habitat for Humanities at this point?
Wow. Can I interject? Would you mind following up offline on that one?
Sure.
Any other questions about the succession process?
Yeah, could Norm, Darlene, could y'all speak about maybe the pros and cons of that overlap time? I can see some of the pros there where you get up to speed, so to speak, but I could also see a con where maybe the staff would become to expect, well, okay, that means we're just going to continue as we have. Would there be any advantage to saying the outgoing director ends on the end of March and the incoming director begins on April 1st?
Do you want me to leave the room?
I was very lucky in the interview process that the board members who were in the room told me that would be something that I would have the initiative to kind of choose whether or not I wanted her there. In terms of expertise, and I know we talked a lot about it, there are some things that, despite me having some talents that Terry did not, I did not have knowledge of things like CARF and DODD practices. And so I did feel that it would be beneficial for me to have her on staff. Our staff, I've been very lucky to have limited turnover. They're very passionate about what they do. But again, a lot of the first things I say are, I hear what you're saying. And I talk through it with them. A lot of times they just want someone to hear that this change is difficult, this change is fast-paced, this is way above and beyond what we thought we were signed up for, and again, empowering them. Professional development in my career has always been very important to me. In terms of strategy for succession planning, I have a lot of work to do there. So our people, aside from administrative staff, we really just have program delivery. And so it's difficult. There's a big gap to fill there. But I did like having Terry there to bounce questions also, bounce questions off of her and ask her opinion. But there is a point too, I think, where what you're saying, they kind of get in the way. And there are a lot of opinions out there about that, about founders serving on boards and about founders being active with your organizations, whether they're as a volunteer or in a co-director capacity. And so I'll leave you to form your own opinion on that. And I guess what I'm sharing is that I was lucky that the board allowed me to do that. So they were very supportive in the decisions I made with how Terry is involved. And I think once she adjusted to retirement and having that time with her family and things, like at this point, she's been very helpful to me. So we'll approach long-time major funders together, and we'll do those things within the community. And she's able to participate in that at this point. But there was definitely a transition period to that. So.
Quick follow-up comment, and then to that. Most of the things that I've read and studied said really the true role when you have a very passionate founder is if you're going to truly have succession, and a lot of times the speed, we heard the mention of the speed or our sustainability, we reach a plateau. We need fresh ideas. We need renewed energy. And one of the things that I read that I thought was very impactful to me in working with organizations is that as we bring that next generation of leader in, if that founding person still has the passion, the board, the volunteer leadership need to get together and you rewrite their job description and you make them your chief advocate officer. And what you want them to do is to be outside the organization, which oftentimes they're going to be very reluctant to do because they had their thumbprint on every single activity that went on inside. And it's telling them, we don't need you to do that anymore. We don't want you to do that anymore. and it requires strong board leadership, because at the end of the day, even that founding member works for the board at some point in time. And if you don't address that phenomena, then basically the board works for them. And really at that point in time, I'm an accountant, I'll tell you what you're doing. You're running a nonprofit sole proprietorship with a group of volunteers. You're really not a nonprofit organization that's board driven. The director works for the board. So I say turn them into advocates, involve them, like you said, in major donor recruitment, get them to open doors, because fundraising in particular, most board members do not want to do it. And that person that had to, you know, really like Lori, that person that had to go out and pound the pavement and open up the doors, they developed that skill set and that thick skin necessary to ask for money because they had to. Strip everything else away and just say, will you continue to open doors for us to push our brand and push our mission and get them out of the day-to-day. And if you do that, I think you can transition their role and make them very effective. If it's okay, I know we have groups where we're coming up to end on time here. I'm sure if they have time, our folks will hang around. But we wanted to kind of end with asking them this question. And I'll ask you guys, try to keep your answers, you know, fairly short. Hindsight's always 20/20. What would you have done different now that you look back on it? So whether it's the decision to promote Norm, to go outside to look for a new director. Oh no, you got to get your thick skin. So we're going to make you stay in the room, you know. And to Lori, your transition, you know, is there anything, if you could go back in time, what would I have done different? Real quick.
No.
No. Okay, so
I think we nailed it. Was it perfect? No. I don't know where the imperfections were, but the team that put together and did the job did an A job, and I don't know what could have been different.
So
you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. From my standpoint, although I obviously worked with our prior executive director for a long time. Operationally, there were many things that I discovered on my own. She was great at leaving trails, so that was a good thing. But I think that's helpful. Just like you said, it's helpful to have, okay, where do I find this, and where's that password, and you know, and this thing that we do once a year, you know, where's that information? So.
Yeah, I think my answer is pretty much no too. The only thing I would add is just communication. You can always communicate more. So I know from the staff perspective, we probably could have been in there talking about it more than we did. So that's probably about it.
I appreciate that. Someone brought up that, you know, what do you do with the employees that might not necessarily like the transition? The more you're upfront and open about it, and the more you communicate, communication always helps overcome, you know, unwarranted perceptions.
For me, you know, I was blindsided. I didn't know what started out as 6 people and a pack of Twizzlers would turn into 22,000 people in 5 years. So I did not know that what my idea was going to be successful. I had zero clue. So I would say be prepared if your idea does take off, that you start getting those people with the skills that you need around you sooner. You know, to start planning sooner. And so for me, I didn't see it coming. So that's what I would have been done different. I feel like we wouldn't, I mean, we've made it thus far. It's been a struggle, but we've made it. And we're proud about that. And, you know, make sure that you are mission focused. There are so many ways to get off your mission. If you need to, you know, be open-minded and redefine your mission, then do that. But know what you're doing, have a vision, have a set of core values that you're all working with, and you know, and just keep at it. And nothing comes easy. And I hope that my kids learn resilience from this. That just because things get tough, you don't quit. You keep going.
Well, we're right at our stop point here. Like I said, I'm sure if you have a couple of questions, I'm sure the panel has contact information, and certainly will either speak to you now, or you can get a hold of them if you have additional questions. Thank you for sharing your stories. They were very impactful. And hopefully for all of you, we would encourage you, as Jenny said in her opening remarks, we are going to have a 4-hour training session on succession planning. First off, I'll forewarn you, it's not to share these types of experiences, so to speak. It's more to say, how do we go about developing a plan? How do we reduce something to writing and kind of institutionalize it so that we sort of have that, along with our strategic plan, in our back pocket should the needs arise for any reason. So we would encourage you to please, follow the emails, go out on the website and sign up. We believe that we have some information and some, practice aids that we can share that can help you just sort of get a little further down on the road as far as defining this for your organization. We appreciate your attendance. We appreciate the work that you do and the lives that you touch and improve. And again, thank you to our panelists for coming here and taking time out of your busy days to share with the rest of the group. Thank you.